Podcasting with Ceri Jones.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Christmas podcast part 2. I've included excerpts from this year, so sit back and relax, grab a beer or something stronger, and maybe a mince pie, and listen to my summary from 2022. Enjoy. Episode 83, Jerry Murphy of Loch Con.
There was an old guy next door, Jimmy Brown. The bay there is called after him, the Browns Bay, but he was gilly for Healy's Hotel.
Yeah.
And he had only one boat, and the hotel had one boat. But then an odd man would ask him, have you another boat? No. And then do you stop here, because we're right beside the lake, they stop here for, do you know where we get a boat? Do you know where we get a boat? And my father just said, I'm going to find out where we get a boat. So he bought a brand new wooden clinker boat made in Bannerrope by Burke Builders. Burke,
nice.
That still exists. And the boat was delivered here, brand new, in around early 70s, late 60s, 68, 69, 70. It was delivered here for £90. No, sorry, £91. £90 for the boat and £1 to deliver from Bannerrobe. I remember I was only probably 12, 14, but I'm the eldest in the family.
Yeah.
But there was a boat on a trailer, and this guy arrived for it, and he had no tow bearer, or probably a hired out car or something, but I was determined to get it to the lake because I was going to get a couple of quid for it.
Yeah.
£2 or something. So I had a bicycle, and the trailer, my father and Tom Healy made the trailer, but they had it in a way that was balanced. So it was easily, you could manoeuvre it. So it was a bit far over the road to walk with it. There was no jockey wheel, so I tied it to the saddle of the bike, and I walked over the road, and my two brothers pushed it. But that time you could do it, because there wasn't much traffic. That was in the 70s, in the mid 70s, and I brought it over the lake and put it out, and I remember getting £2 or 50 pence or something like that for doing it. A wooden boat, yeah. Though a lot heavier, but it was the way the trailer was made. It was balanced on it, you know. Yeah. And the trailer was made out of an old mini minor subframe with the mini minor. You just take the body off it and use the subframe, and got some guy to weld it up. But then we had, my father had always a big old Hillman car, a big old Hillman Manx with a tow bearer on it. But when the shoreline had flooded in the back end of the year, when the boats would start coming up, again my father was always working, so
89, sea trout specialist, Alan Rees. Yeah. I think every year, I've been in the game such a long time now, and sea trout anglers tend to be negative people, don't they? They are, it's not as good as it used to be, there's no rain and no water, there's this and the other. But I think it's probably more true this year. Yeah. And last year, actually.
I think we're the pragmatists of the bunch, right? So we everybody lives in hope going fishing, but when we go to the river, we go, not tonight, or not now because of one reason or another. There's always an opportunity, and don't get me wrong, you can't catch fish unless your fly's in the water. So, but there are optimum times, and there's a myriad of factors that affect that. Take, for example, the price of fuel. I can go every single night. I'm retired now.
They started off well and went back to fuel now.
But you know what I mean.
I know.
So what we're looking for is better than average chances. And with the low water, maybe the fish have been coming in on the tides and going back out, but it's hormones that drive them to run, not the river levels. So if the urge isn't there, then maybe they're not going to come in. Although there are a few places that buck the trend, Rob Redmond, for example, up in North Wales, he's had several, but then again, he's fishing tidal stretches or near tidal stretches, whereas majority of the anglers that I know
Further up.
yeah, further upstream. And if there's, although suin will run or sea trout will run in low water, if the urge isn't there, maybe they won't run so far. So,
Do you find that if sea trout run and the conditions are, the water levels are low, and it's tidal, they'll come up because it's tidal. They come up to the lower stretches, lower reaches, you can see, and then they'll realise, this water is low. Do they just sit there and wait, or do they sometimes go back?
yeah, I think they do go back. They've tagged salmon that have gone up one river, back out to sea, up another river, back to sea, and then gone up a totally different river. It's as if...
Is it?
Yeah. So, and the thing is, the physiology of a saltwater fish is different to a freshwater fish because of the salt content in the water. So even when the fish come in, they generally don't come in off the tide because the physiology, because of the saltiness of the water versus freshwater, they have to adapt. So they stay in that brackish tidal area for a little time before moving upstream anyway.
Episode 90, In Search of Resident Rainbows. Oh yes, what a good fish this is. This is better. As soon as the fly hit the water then, it's a better fish. I got a feeling this might be a brown. It's knocking, it's not running, just like dogged, knocking his head. I'd be surprised if it isn't a brown. Oh, it's just a big rainbow. Definitely a good fish. It's a good decision to come over here now because I'm looking across the far side and no one's caught a fish over there. These fish have had so much peace and quiet over here, And they're confident, they take flies with confidence here now because they don't see. Ooh, what a good fish. I haven't seen it properly yet. In fact, this reel I've got now is it's the new Snowbee. It's a lovely, lovely reel, but one thing is missing, which I love, is the ratchet sound when a fish is taken, screaming off. This is a quiet reel. I want to see this fish. There's one thing worse than losing a fish without seeing it. Oh, this is a big fat rainbow. It's probably one of the better fish I've had for a long time from you. The thing is, I've got my... Oh, listen to that. You just keep on going and going. The thing is, I brought this net with me. I got two nets. I got one, to be honest, just for a Stillwater Rainbows net. McLean's. It's a lovely, decent net. You could comfortably put a 5-pound fish in it. And I forgot to put it in the van. And all I got now is a scoop net. So this fish isn't going to fit in this scoop net. Well, I'm going to have trouble anyway. But let's see. Oh my God! I think this is a double-figure fish. Just say I'm quietly excited is another thing. But this fish might be in for a while. And he's probably been feeding on this bank now for the last year without seeing any flies. And along comes Jones with his dries. Oh, come on. Oh, I don't think I could hear that. But It looks just as good as what it sounds, I tell you. Again, that fish now, in the ripple. I can't figure out if he's taking... Yeah, he's taking the dropper, taking the daddy. Oh my God, look at the size of this. I hope he's going to stay on to get a photograph. I don't know if I'm going to get this fish in the net, but... Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Whew. Stunning fish. Absolutely stunning. I'm going to stop recording, I think, for a bit and get some nice pictures of this fish. I am over the moon. Episode 88, Craig Barr and Flash Attack Flies. You've got obviously thousands of flies. Mm-hmm. Have you got 6 patterns which you think these are my go-to patterns?
Yeah. If I was lake fishing on the boat, it would be tequila booby, tequila fab, traffic light cormorant, crisp packet buzzer, red holographic dialback, yellow owl.
Well, I can guarantee when this podcast go out, I hope you got them in that shop there, because you'll have so many orders for them. Your top 6, I guarantee that. Yeah.
We have plenty.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, people quite often ask what flies your go-to flies. And you could narrow it down to half a dozen.
Yeah,
and I'd confidently go out in a season with those flies I mentioned. You've got all season. You've got the buzzer, the crisp packet. That's all-round fish catcher all the time long for me. I'd probably try and add an emo in there if I could. The red holographic dialback. The tequila booby is probably the most consistent booby I've ever fished. Tequila fab for the washing line. Not so much the nastiness of the fab, but the washing line, it's brilliant for that. Yellow owl is a great all-round catcher, and on the pin fly. That'll be on my cast tomorrow at some point, I'm sure. Yeah.
What's your fly box like? Because I tell you why I asked that. I know guys, they tie for people, you know, they're like professional tiers. Yeah. You look in a box, and it's like paint and decorators. Other people's houses are lovely, and they leave it. I bet you've got the best fly tying box going.
I have some very nice ones and have some very rough ones.
Yeah.
What I tend to do is, I do it all the time. The wife just thinks I'm crazy. I'll have it only for big matches, mine. If I've got a big match coming up, it's Rutland, Gratham, Chew, wherever it might be. Yeah. I'll make a separate box for that day.
Do you?
I'll go out of my stock and I'll think, right, Chew Valley, what do I always do when we're down there? This fly, that fly, this fly, that fly. And I'll just fill a box, all pretty lined up, all the sizes, all the flies I believe I need, and I'll leave the rest at home. I'll go with what I know.
96, Loch Melvin boatman, Andreas Ferreira. Well, what was nice, it's quite unique, isn't it, Melvin? In as much you haven't got to keep looking for shallows and bays and points. You can just be right out in the open.
That's it. And a lot of men, if you tell them pulling out in the deep, so especially the traditional boys, they frown at you and they don't understand how it works. But then when you've hit a couple of fish and you go around and do the drift again, and you hit another couple of fish, it works great. I mean, if you have a good boatman or you know what you're at on the engine, you can stay on the school all day long.
Do they go up and down the levels? Because what I found, we were going over and say you have a couple of fish, then you go quickly back around, have a couple more, and whether or not we weren't finding them, but then rarely on the third time round, you know, we'd have fish and we'd search for another pod. Did they come up and down with the layers? What's the reason for that?
What they do is if you caught a couple of fish and you put them back into the water and you release them, they go into the pod. And sometimes they take the pod down deep because what I reckon is some of them sonnig and salt after they've been hooked and released. And they just go sit down in the deep water for a wee while. Right. And they bring the pod with them. Depends on the light of the day, I think, as well. If it's very bright, the fish are going to stay deep all day long. But you will get them up. If there's enough surface disturbance, they'll come up. If you think there's legs on it or a bit of diarrhea in it, they will come up. I've seen in bright sunshine and a wee cordway ripple on it, pulling wee muddlers, size 12 muddlers through the surface on a floating line. Then wee black boys will come up and they'll hammer the fly.
Yeah. What about going on now to the gillaroos? They are all hugging the margins, I guess, and the sides they feed in.
Oh, yeah, they're tight on the stones.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, I was out in the Melbourne, and we were down in a place called Flanagan's Bay, and we couldn't meet to get a fish. We couldn't buy a fish, even as they would say in Ireland. And we left it, and we went up to a place called Hills Bay, and real quiet, sheltered bay in the westerly wind, and a nice hatch of olives and mayfly coming off it. And tight on the shore, we got 4 nice, good-sized gillaroo. And the American client wanted to know how we know they're gillaroo, and I showed him. It's a distinctive. The fins are damaged always from hooking in the rocks. And
Right, yeah.
if you feel underneath the front bottom fins, you can actually feel the gizzards that they have, when you can feel the wee stones in them.
They're very orange as well, and they're bright. They're more colourful.
Bright orange and big red spots in them.
I've never had nothing big. Have you had any decent sized ones?
My best fish off of Loch Melbourne is a gillaroo of 4 pounds 9 ounces.
Wow. How did that come about?
Easter weekend, teaching a German client how to fly cast, and just messing around off the shore.
Off the shore?
And off the shore with 2 buzzers on it over Easter weekend. And the buzzers just swang around, and we had a wee tap, and I just gave it a wee pull, and the next thing, all hell broke loose, and that was him on.
Wow. Did you get a photograph of that fish?
We've got photographs of it, and we have, there's a video of it as well. But we were that ill prepared for the fish, we didn't even have a landing net or nothing of it. So we had to scoop it up and flick it onto the bank.
Episode 80, Mark Vickery of Paper Mill Trout Fishery. I bet you've got some stories, man. Have you caught some people and banned people?
Oh, yeah. I think that's what people don't like about me. I do my heart on my sleeve, and if I don't like somebody, they go, and that's that. I seen somebody catching once, and they were put in, I said, what are you using there on there now? And I crept up behind, and I said, what are you doing by there now? Oh, my own devices, he said. I made missing my own devices. I said, what have you got, man? And what he done, he was making balls of power bait and putting it in a lady's stocking, a little bit of it, and I putting it through the stocking onto the buzzer.
Like a suspended buzzer, but
and that's what he was doing. So away, go, don't come back. Yeah, so you always get, there's been numerous issues, and there'll always be somebody who will cheat. That's part and parcel of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, you will, won't it?
Yeah, always will carry it.
There was, I used to work part-time once for a couple of years down in Dufferin Springs when it was a trout lake.
Yeah.
And there was a big complex of lakes, so you couldn't see from the lodge what was going on in the bottom lake. So you had monitors, so I was there in the office looking at, and I could see this guy, he wasn't casting as such, almost roll casting. And I thought, he's up to something. And then he caught one, I thought, I'm going to creep up, like you said, up towards him now, right? And you don't confrontation.
No.
So, and this guy, he looked like a bad Vinnie Jones character, right? And I thought, right, I got to confront him. So I went up to him now, right? And all of a sudden, I appeared about 10 yards away, and he could see.
Panic.
He didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then he just carried on fishing. I walked up to him and said, any good? And he said, yeah, I've had one. I said, yeah, I've seen you have one. I said, it's been hard last couple of weeks. Can I see what you're using? And he could tell, it's only just a nymph, he said. I said, let's look at it. Anyway, he lifted it up now. It's a big ball of bright fluorescent pink. What's that stuff?
Power
bait.
Yeah.
And I said, you realise you can't use this? I said. And do you know what? I was expecting, you guys, you can have a bit of a confrontation here. Do you know what? He started crying.
No way.
Started crying. Bottom lip was going. He said, I'm having a bad time. He said, I can't catch anything. And do you know what? Yes, I was stumped then. I really didn't know what to do. I was expecting a bit of aggro.
Yeah.
And then I said, look, I was a bit soft then. I said, look, give me the tub. You give me the tub, a little jar.
Yeah.
And I took it. And I kind of felt sorry for him. Because it was more than that. He was upset. His head was shed up or something.
Yeah, you get it.
So
but
he fished. I said, carry on. I said, but, the flies. At the end of the couple of hours then, he came up. He didn't have no more. And I gave him the tub back and he went.
Yeah, I remember a similar thing. I remember I was watching father and his kids. And father had gone, left them for a second or two. I went over. I said, what are you catching on, kid? Oh, magic potion, my daddy said. Oh, is it? Because I was standing down one end, and I could see all this glitter stuff on the surface of the water flashing me. I knew straight away what it was. And I went, that's what the kid said. Oh, it's a magic potion, he said. I said, oh, where is it then? And they showed it to me. Oh. And his father's over here. So I had him then, and away he went. I've never seen him since. But yeah, you know, I said, bloody hell, you know, I got the kids, so why do it?
Episode 87, Corrib Ferox. And that changed me. I think that was around about 2001, 2002. And that became the obsession for me then. I had to get a big trout. Initially, you know, I wanted a double figure fish. So, on my next trip, I kitted myself with some trolling rods and bait runners. And from then, the following like 15 years or so, it was a learning curve. And when people see big fish and they say, I was caught on a trawl, you know, as if to say there's no skill or knowledge going into catching that fish. All I can say to them is, you try it. Because I tell you what, I've fished at the highest level of fly fishing, internationals, and I've caught large ferox. And I tell you what, there is equal amounts of respect and skill needed in catching a ferox of 20 pound than there is in catching anything on the fly. You've got to know the areas and the times they feed and what depth they feed, different times of year, and different wind conditions, different amounts. There's a whole array of different things which I've learnt in that time. Now, as the name suggests, ferox, it's a cannibal. And even though there are different stories with different scientists have proven the fact, apparently, that, you know, it is a different species of fish, the ferox, which I kind of think probably is. But whatever it is, if it's a brown trout, which has just turned cannibal, or it is a different strain, for me, I just love fishing for them. And for most of us, when fishing with a fly, realistically, a 5 pound trout is a special fish. Anything over that is, for some, a fish of a lifetime. But if a trout needs to get any bigger than that, to pack the weight on, it's not going to get any much bigger than that size when feeding on flies. So, naturally, when it gets to that size, it feeds then on fish. When it comes to the corrib, it's full of roach, and that's the main diet of the ferox of the corrib, is roach. Occasionally, you'll get them on perch. I have actually caught one. I caught a large trout once, which eventually come off, and that was on a perch. So it's not to say they won't take it, but I can imagine they could be pretty desperate to take a perch because it's very spiky, and I can imagine it's very hard to actually to eat, even though pike do them all the time, I guess, by the sounds of it. But no, roach is the key diet for the ferox. Now, the main areas I would fish for them are where there's deep water, close to shallow water. Because when I went out there, first of all, many years ago to the corner. Episode 109, Peter Cockwell.
We've got a lovely collection there.
Walk this way. You have to be just careful coming past here. She likes her stuff.
Oh, this is your tying room.
That's the model I had made of the grayling.
Wow.
That's how
Look
big
at that fin.
That's how big a 5 pound grayling is.
And you, that's more or less the measurements and everything.
Yeah, it's dead on for the measurements, yeah. I got to make a new case and have it downstairs. It shouldn't be up here out of sight.
No.
But it used to be in the shop, you know, where lots of people saw it, obviously.
Yeah.
But what I was just going to say, look at the mouth, Ceri. All right.
Yeah.
Now, the mouth of the grayling you're used to is like this.
Yes.
It's an overbite, isn't it?
Yeah.
Arctics aren't. They're the other way round.
Somewhat red, like.
Yeah, but they're highly predatory, those things. I've caught them on mice, almost as big as the fish itself. And they're just highly predatory.
I love that.
And you think, you stupid thing, you're so beautiful, you should be taking little dry flies, not a fucking great lure.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to speak more. We've had a most gorgeous meal while we've been chatting as well. But I think there's another podcast in time. Perhaps I'll come down again and then chat more about Diva Springs and more be small waters and look back on the other waters which you fished. Before I actually wrap up and get my cameras here, I'm going to get my light in as well. I get some of these photographs with me to go over this. There's one question I ask everyone to finish off. But where would you want to be to make your last cast?
Ooh, there's a good one. To make my last cast, oh my goodness. I suppose it's going to have to be home in Cornwall, because I'm Cornish and that's it. So yeah, down there I guess. But it's interesting because Sue and I have spoken about the end of days, because I'm getting to be an old git these days. And I said, I just want to be cremated and that's the end of it. And I'd often said that I'd like my ashes scattered on my favourite water, on the basis that if I can't catch them when I'm alive, at least I can choke the little bastards when I'm dead. But she then said, she said, okay then, so I'll sprinkle your ashes on your favourite waters. So it'll be somewhere that's really sunny, like Florida, the Seychelles. I said, that's not my favourite places.
Episode 74, Welsh Fly Tying Guru, Sean Thomas. And when we went to this spot then, which you took me, I thought we were going into Nam. It was like I expected a guy with a banjo or a Deliverance or something.
Jungle warfare.
It was, yeah. When we get to this spot, which you told me about, we had to climb over 2 trees which had fallen down the river.
Yeah, they got blown over in that storm we had, didn't we, recently?
There's a bit of a wall, wasn't it? And you knew there'd be fish in this spot.
Yeah.
And we both crept over, and we just both peeked over to have a look. And I didn't actually see the fish. But you didn't actually see it yourself.
No, I didn't see it. There was too much colour in the water at the time, wasn't there? But I sort of knew in the general area where it was going to be.
Was you Euro nymphing gear you had on?
Yeah, Euro nymphing, yeah. So basically, like with Euro nymphing, you just you have like a length of mono from your leader with your flies on, and then that goes to like a section of indicator lightning, which I use like a 2-tone indicator.
And I thought that was your lipstick when you were getting it out of your pockets. Just on a Thursday night, that is, eh?
Sundays only. No, but yeah, you're just watching for like sort of stops and little plaques on the line. But yeah, we hooked that fish, and then it jumped clear of the water, didn't it?
Yeah. Then, good few pound, wasn't it?
Yeah, headed down river.
We didn't really think of how to land it, really. The first thing was to hook it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I did. Remember I said if we do hook something, we're going to get in a bit of trouble if there's any size. We had to battle with it then for, I think it was about 5 or 6 minutes, when they were trying to get underneath the trees, pass the rod through the trees.
And you would cut the shreds, your hands as well, wouldn't it? Going through.
We had to battle through a hawthorn to get through.
In fact, what I'll do, I'll actually put that little clip up on to go with this so people can see what we actually went through. And then I was going to go down the river through this like bush, and I heard the and I thought you'd fallen in. But because you're on the wall, you just jumped in, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I thought, you still got it. And I saw you put the net in.
Yeah.
And next thing, I just put your both hands on your head.
Yeah. They managed to get into another snag, didn't they? A little bit lower down the river. And I could actually see it at my feet. When I was playing it, it ran down the river, went underneath this snag. So I walked up on it, and I could see it. I could see it still attached to my line. So I tried to plunge my net, obviously, to try and get it, and it took off.
That'd be a nice way to start the season off, wouldn't it?
I'm glad you didn't catch the choice words at the end on the video.
Episode 78, Keith McDonough. You actually fish these articulated lures then in Kylemore and other venues where you fish. Do you fish off a drifting boat? Do you fish it, or do you anchor? Or do you look for areas? Or how exactly would you fish? You wouldn't fish it like Loch style, I suppose, do
you? You can fish it lock style, but the problem is that you want to get down a little bit more than you would with conventional fly, I feel, on the lakes. And I think what works well is to bring the boat nose down in the wind and work along drop-offs. We found those fish on sharp drop-offs hanging on the edge of them on that lake. So working along, so you're casting out the side of the boat and then retrieving. And what that means is that you get the belly in the fly line,
Yeah.
and you're not trying to fight to catch up with the fly, if you know what I mean, when you're influenced by the wind. But the funny thing about that lake, right, and part of it is that some of those trout are just, there's no real fishing pressure on them, so they're relatively eager. But the funny thing about it is, some of the really good days where we've got a few fish have been on a flat can, when the small trout are up dimpling on the surface and the bigger guys are below taking them off. So that's kind of in contrast to what I've experienced on the river, because I often find on the river that the best days are the really rough days, overcast or lashing rain or windy, whereas those bigger guys on there, it seemed to be that they were up taking the small trout.
Yeah.
Well, they were coughing them up when we caught them anyway, so that was the kind of thing.
Episode 99, North Wales River Specialist, Rob Redman.
The last couple of weeks I've been great. The river was low and that, but surprising how much action we did have, to be honest.
Yeah, the conditions that have been, we always knew that it wasn't going to be easy. We knew there was going to be a window some point during that night, and sure there was. But that opportunity came by just knowing when there's fish in front of you and there isn't.
Yeah.
And that proved to be right, where the spot that I first put you in. And
it soon became clear you knew the water, because even from the start, when we went to fish for the bass in the junction pool, it was, as soon as we got there, seen the few fish, and you said just wait. As soon as eggs, in about 20 minutes, half hour, I have never in my life seen so many bass in a pool.
Yeah, well, it's just something that occurs on these big tides, and as soon as that light level drops, then they do come alive. And it's the same with the sea trout, they feel that sense of security in a way. Once that light level drops, then they begin to feed.
And I've never seen anything like you said, they're feeding on shrimp. What was the name of the shrimp again, you said?
A lot of them are brine shrimp, so there's probably a mixture of different shrimp in there, and the small probably bait fish as well. But the majority of what's there is brine shrimp.
Because I didn't realise what these shrimp look like, and I think a lot of people don't. You just expect shrimp to be literally look like shrimp. And when we decided to move from there, you said, right, put your light on and look down while you're wading. And I looked down, and hopefully you can see it actually on the video I did on the phone. And they look like pin fried, don't they? Loads of them.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah,
there's clouds of them.
They're almost microscopical, really.
Yeah.
But once the bass lock onto them, you're kind of in trouble unless you can, like I said, get a shrimp that's going to stand out from the rest.
Yeah.
That he can pick out. Then that's the way to go. But trying to match something like that is never going to happen.
And then, he locked up once, so he had one pull, and he just went slack. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But you were saying that really your best chance is when they stop, when they start to slow down.
Yeah, so, when you will notice a pattern. So as soon as the light fades, there'll be a bit of a frenzy on. So give it half an hour to an hour, let them feed, and then as soon as you hear less surface disturbance, then that's the time to target them, because what they're doing then, they might have basically, because we all have food, we all get full.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing for bass. They might get that sense, right, I'm full now, but if an opportunity comes and something like maybe a very small bait fish passes them, they'll have a snap at it, and that's where you can target them as well, and also with the bigger shrimps as well. So
you've had them up to £10 or more as well, haven't you?
Yeah, out of that section there, yeah.
Jesus. Well, You whet my appetite tonight.
Yeah.
Because last night I didn't have any shrimp patterns on me. But in fact, when I was looking in my bag, which I left in the van tonight, I actually couldn't find them. But I had them with me in my waistcoat last night. So, but tonight, if we don't hit the sea trout, like I said, we'll give it a try on the back.
Episode 67, Dominic Kerrigan.
I had the heaviest fish, just over £4, I think it was. Got that fish on the qualifying day as well, which was good. It was out. I was partnered with John Somerville. I know you mentioned John in one of the other podcasts. I was partnered with John, and Noel Moran was boating, and there was a nice wind on the lake. It was a real nice wind, and I think it was blowing into Cahir. And we went down, and Noel is a lovely wooden boat, a clinker boat, and it does drift like a dream. There's no doubt about it. It drifts like a dream.
Yeah.
So we went in, and we're fishing off, not deep water, but fishing off marginally deep water into shallows, and came into a small inlet at Cahir Bay, and I put the fly in. I was pulling away and chatting, and the next thing just came up on the hang, and this lad just came out of the water, and the lovely head and tail over the bob fly. I just took it and let him down. Like the thing about that water was that clear. You could see the fish going down and down at the fly, and just lifted into him. And the fight took off, and I was playing away at him. And of course, then John was fishing the other side of the boat. He was fishing away, and my fish was steaming out the front of the boat here, and John was pulling away. And the next thing, I just looked with the corner of my eye, and of course, there was obviously two fish lying in there. The comrade came up and went for John's fly over, a big head and tail over it, and missed it. So that was the two fish were sitting in there. It must have been a pair of fish.
Wow.
They were hanging about in there. So John fished for a little bit, didn't get it. So fair play, he quit fishing when he seen that I was in a pretty good fish. He quit fishing. Noel got on the oars, but between the three of us, we got all done and got him directed round the rocks and into the net. And then that was, I won the heat that day. I can't even remember what the prize was for winning the heat. So then, of course, that carries on then for the heaviest fish for the whole of the competition. That was maybe the Wednesday, was my qualifying day. The Saturday then, it blew really, really hard. So the qualifying days then were cancelled. Or maybe it was the final was cancelled and it had to be rescheduled. So you were sort of checking every day, and the sweat was on because you were the heaviest fish, and you were phoning, was there anything big got today? Was there anything big got today? But yeah, I came out of that in the end. So I ended up, I think I had Crystal Trophy and €1,000 plus whatever the winning of the heat got me. I can't remember that. Yeah, so there's. Look, the thing is, it leaves you can fish competition free for a bit. Then, so you can, you're not paying anything. It's profit at that stage, which is good.
Will your wife be listening to this podcast? Because then you tell her £250 you're at.
That's what I told her. I says, that's £250, so she'll be out it in diesel.
Episode 95, Colliford Reservoir and Wimbleball.
I changed my cast, took the cast off, put the sight bob on, and about a foot or so, maybe a bit more, of leader, 7.5 Snowbee super fluorocarbon, and a little size 12 black Pennell. But it wasn't long before I saw a fish I could cover, and I can see it now. This fish was just travelling up the wind, a slow little breeze, a gentle little breeze, but I could see his tail and his dorsal just hitting the surface. I just covered in front of it and just waited. And next thing, the dorsal and the tail just disappeared underneath, and I thought to myself, he can't be far away then. And I kind of didn't expect him to take, but the sight bob went down, I lifted, and pandemonium, all hell broke loose then, as they do, And first of all, he just screamed up the bank, just going the other way, and then he ran towards me, he screamed up the bank again, and then run towards me. And after a dogged fight, I actually brought him in. Now, I thought to myself, how the hell am I going to land this fish? Because a lot of sticks around the sides as well. I had to watch because, sunken logs and things. He did head for this one, a branch feature. So for not to get stuck in there, I waded out to this branch feature up to the bottom of my shorts just to make sure I wouldn't get stuck in there. But anyway, the only thing I had was my little scoop net, and so he wasn't going to fit in that. But I did manage to, in one way or the other, get his head in and lift him out and quickly get him onto the shore. And I had it. What a beautiful fish. And the evening summer sun was getting low now, and the glistening of the scales of this beautiful common. I was over the moon then that, okay, it's not a trout, but it's something which I didn't expect, never in a million years. And it was a nice little bonus, actually, with this hot weather. I thought, I'm not going to get any sport, really. But with hot weather, carp love it, don't they? So I hurriedly set up my tripod, took a few pictures, and then released this fish then. What a fish it was. I estimate it was probably between about 8 and 10 pound. But a wild common carp, so it was over the moon.
Episode 102, Abercorthie Estate and Golden Grove resident guide, Jamie Harries.
How did your fishing come about, though?
Oh, it's really... I was growing up on the local council estate in Llandilo.
Oh, you were actually from Llandilo?
Yeah, Llandilo boy all my life. My father still lives on the estate. And it was kind of, it was in the DNA of the estate, really. You're either a sea trout fisherman or that's all we done, like. Yeah. So nearly every household would have 2 or 3 boys, and, we'd be all fishing, and the older guys then would kind of take you under your wing and stuff like that. It's a bit different now, isn't it? But, we'd be like, we'd be fishing with grown men, like, they'd be taking you night fishing when you were like 13 years old. It's bloody bonkers. I mean, you can imagine that now. It's like, some of my still good mates now, used to take us fishing when we were youngsters.
Sea trout was your thing?
Yeah, a lot of it would be mostly early morning worming,
Oh, so, was it?
Yeah, I used to do the paper round. I come back, you'd see all the guys coming home in the morning with their bin bags and stuff. They'd be like hush hush, cloak and dagger kind of stuff. Yeah. Off then selling the fish somewhere, local pubs.
So it was a dream job, really, when you come up on that.
Yeah, it was weird because as a youngster, the local town, Llandilo, there's the bridge you go over. Lord Corder then had donated, say, the first 500 yards of fishing to the kids and the old age pensioners of Llandilo and the little village by Bath. So, as a few of us youngsters, we would venture down now and again and have a little cast on the Corder water back in the day. Oh. So it's a bit, looking back now, it's a bit kind of, that was proper, you had to be like proper posh to go and fish down there back in the day, you know what I mean? They didn't want us riff-raff fishing that, but to be looking after that now is quite... Yeah. Sometimes look at that pool on the bridge and think, a lot of memories there as a kid growing up. Yeah. Not just me, that's a shame because, we've maintained, I said to Sir Edward, we really need to keep that as a gesture. I think Llandilo run it, I think we charge them like a penny to fish it or something, something ridiculous.
Episode 94, an Englishman with a passion for fishing dries on Loch Corrib, Ted Werry.
It really wants to, 90% of the time it wants to be static anyway.
Yeah.
You might slowly retrieve it on some occasions, and it's this restraint to stop doing it that a lot of the fishermen find the problem.
When I fish dries, I normally fish 2. Would you fish 2 or do you just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I fish 2. I do fish 2, unless it's a flip carp. And then I'll go on a tapered leader and a single fry. I mean, my best fish last year was £7.2, and that was in a flat carp, and it was by sheer luck. We was in Ballycurran Bay, down near the lighthouse, and there was a dimple of a rise about 2 foot from the bank. And I didn't actually spot it first, and my pal spotted it, and he said, I think there's a fish just moved there. And I knocked the engine off, and we stopped, and there was just a dimple again, and on a single mayfly. And I threw it out, and he just drank it, and it was £7.2.
Wow!
But if you're not looking for these things and these signs, you'll go past a lot of feeding fish. I see boats come tearing past at all sorts of speeds, going from A to B, but you can't actually see what's going in the water when you're doing that. And I would have missed that fish if my pal hadn't seen it. You know, I was looking the other way.
Yeah.
So you could soon go past them, but to be fair, most of the big fish I've picked up has been in the lee of the islands. You know, when you've been cruising around looking for a fish that's picking stuff off near the shoreline.
Yeah.
And usually they're a quality fish that's doing that. The rises look nothing. You would think it was probably a roach rising. And sometimes even when they take you fly, you know, the big fish, it's just a small suck and it's gone. And if you're not watching it, even in a ripple, you can miss them.
Yeah.
They've certainly altered the ways. I mean, when I first came to Ireland, you could see them splashing at olives 40 yards, 50 yards away. Probably half a dozen fish coming up asleep. And the same in the mayfly. But the fish seem to have changed. They don't splash at the olives in Valenauti at all. It's a very, very shallow rise, and sometimes you've got beyond the ball to spot them. And you may have to fish a nymph just under the surface in a lot of cases. They sometimes won't look at the dun at all. You know, you just got to try different things. They're there, and it's up to you to try and master what they're at.
There's so many different rise forms, isn't there? I experienced one day this year, and I was fishing Portacaran Bay, and it was one of those textbook days. It was a lovely rolling wave, and it was overcast, and it was warm, and there was so much fly coming off, right? It was a race sometimes to see who was going to get the fly first, a trout or the gulls. The gulls were coming down, swooping down for them. And you know what? I had 3 distinct rise forms during that day, which I had fish. You had the splashy fish, you know, the savage, it's up splash, and they're on.
Yeah.
And then you had one of those up and over on the side. I love them. It's almost slow motion. You just see the silhouette, you can see, coming over the top. And then all of a sudden, and then sometimes you look in and thinking, was that a fish? Was that a rise? And then your line would just go, you know. One of the most successful and consistent match angler in the country, Welshman Gareth Dixon.
Your top flies, your go-to flies, what would it be? Or not necessarily Llewellyn again, with your competition scene. I guess it's the same flies.
Well, you see, Rutland is a bit different. You're using more of the fabs down there and the leggy Nemos and stuff like that, nymphs. Whereas here it'd be more cormorants, diaos, booby. Not very rare to use a fab here. It's more at size 12 booby here for myself, isn't it? When it goes a bit harder. Or when the wind's up, it's a full-on size 10. But you're still going down that tip line, slow approach when the fish goes harder. I still see it.
So when fish goes harder, you don't necessarily change the flies, you change the speed.
Yeah, or you go a little bit smaller, but that's why the bung does so well, because it allows people to fish slow. The people that can't fish slow, they're watching that bung, and they are fishing slow, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's
as regards your lines, I bet between you and Russell, you probably got more lines than Glasgow angling. If you want to stick to your top 3 lines, which you had to have.
Dive 5 sweep for pulling. That is the best line to find fish. Dive 5 sweep is one of the best pulling lines. You go to a new lake and they're on a pole, well, you can find them, can you? Because it's coming all the way through the layers. Summer fishing, when it goes hard, is a booby basher. It's got to be a booby basher because it's the fastest sinking line out there. And you look at some of the leagues in the summer, you catch 30, 40 fish in it because you can get down to them. And it does my head in a bit. People go, oh, floating line. Is catching a fish in a floating line as skillful as catching a fish 30 foot deep? I think when the fish go deeper, it's more skill, it's more fin.
It's more physical as well.
Yeah, and getting them flies into that right zone and painting that picture in your head that you're in that zone of fish.
Yeah.
And obviously for nymphing and stuff like that, the 12-foot slow tip, that is the one I use 90% of the time for slow fishing, nymphs, fabs.
A 12-foot slow tip?
12-foot slow tip, yeah. Yeah, and of course you got to have your dries, haven't you? Yeah. You got to have your floater for the dries.
It was quite an eye-opener actually when I was on the nets last time I was here, to see them they're in the lake, more or less. Like, there's nothing to...
The amount of people you take down there and go, have a look at these, and they could stay there all day watching them. Where can you see a 15, 16 pound fish just swimming around in the lake?
Yeah, and in that condition.
Yeah.
Well, it comes to the time now, I ask the same question to everyone, and I probably think I know what the answer's going to be. Where would you want to be to make your last cast?
Well, there's only one place, isn't there? You'll be sat up here, up the Llwyd, with Dice M and a booby.
I thought there was going to be some romance there.
No, it's going to be, there's been romance in the Llwyd, but not like
that. Well, many thanks, Gar.
Oh, thank you.
Perhaps next time when it's a bit warmer, I'll have another day. We'll have a day out together.
Yeah, we'll have a day's fishing, but we'll wait for the heaters to come on. And
Episode 97, television presenter and author Will Millard.
I set up these dead bait rods in the same way that I'd been doing it for a week, and then I basically had like the pub chuck rod down the edge that I set up, with an hour of light to go under a big fat float, the way I used to catch them when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, growing up in the fens back home, big sort of like pike drain fishing, which I used to do when I was a kid. And I had a dead bait roach, and I just flung it down the corner, no more than a foot off the bank. And I remember Tom, the cameraman, had cracked some joke. No one's doing any work by this point, Ceri, obviously. It hadn't been working.
It was getting late in the afternoon, if I remember, was it?
Really late. Like the sun had set. It was really, perfect predator time. This is the time. But it didn't feel right. Like it was one of those times where you didn't really think it was going to happen,
Yeah.
And Tom had cracked a joke. Me and Jess were laughing. And you know what? And
this was the last day.
And we probably would have invested a bit more time into it, but we didn't have that much more time. We'd run out of money. We were doing it without being paid by that point. And something made me look down, at the float. And I looked at the float, and it moved almost imperceptibly, like a shudder, a tremble, but absolutely, exactly. It's the click on the reel, right? And I had this weird thought where I'm like, right now in this moment in our team, I'm the only person that knows a little bit like that moment in Jaws before he tells the rest of the crew and he's clipping in, So I've hooked into this fish, and as soon as it's hooked, it's chugged for a while, dead weight, and then it's just gone. And it's gone, and actually quite a powerful, quite a fast run. And as it's gone, I felt the angle of the line grind up against something. And the angle of the line from my rod tip's going acutely down into the water by the marginal edge. And then I can feel the line starting to run up as it's greying up against this obstacle, this big snag under the water. And obviously at that point, I'm like, I'm going to lose the fish. I'm going to lose the fish. I'm going to lose the fish. The fish. Not a fish, the fish. Yeah. That's the point the cameras start rolling, is when you see this fish and you can see kind of like Tom scrabbling to get the focus. And as he pull focuses, and he left it in, you can see it go blurry. And as he pull focuses onto the fish, you see the fish explode in the middle of the lake. Just literally leaping out of the water.
That's the first time you've seen it, then.
That's the first time you see it. And then it's it. It's obvious what it is. Yeah. But my line is going straight down under this snag. Oh. So the fish is tethered, right? I'm going to lose this fish. I'm like, I have got to cut down the angle between my rod tip, that snag, and that fish that's on the surface. Yeah. The rod's 12 foot long. I'm fishing into about 12 foot of depth. The snag's at the bottom of the pond, and the fish is on the surface. That's not a good position to be in, Ceri.
No.
So I remember just thinking, right, I'm going in the lake. Instant decision. I was like, I've got to get this line off the snag. So I took my wellies off and leapt into the margins of this pond. And it wasn't until afterwards, when people had watched it and people got in touch on social media, they're like, why'd you take your boots off? And I'm like, I don't know. That was really stupid. Like, why did I take my wellies off and then leap into this lake where there was, loads of snags, bikes, bit of metal working, like,
catch your feet.
Exactly. But I jumped in and I plunged the rod under the water and I felt the line ping off this snag. I feel like it might have been something like long and fairly uniform, like a scaffolding pole or something, and it just pinged over the edge. And then I was in full connection with the fish. And it was actually quite a short fight. And I remember just like easing it back towards me, and I had the net out, and the head came up, and it went over the spreader block, and I just lifted it, and that was it. She was in. And I brought her up onto the bank, and it opened its mouth and my hook fell out. And I had two treble hooks on. The first treble wasn't in its mouth at all. In the second treble, there was 1 point in the fish, and it was bent back almost flat, and it fell out. And I was like, how lucky was I?
Episode 84, A Corrib Island Lunch with Colin Follen.
So he'd hire me for 2 weeks in May during the Mayfly. He'd stay in a house on the shore in Uachtarard there with his family and some of his business partners. They'd take over the whole house. I gillied him one day. They'd never really caught any fish dapping on the lake, and it was very, very windy. And he said to me, so you're my new gilly. He says, we've been coming here now for 3 or 4 years, and I think we've only caught about 3 or 4 trout. And we come for a couple of weeks at a time. It was a big enough old wave now. I said to him, I says, do you know, if you want fish today now, I says, we'll troll flies for a few hours. And he says, geez, that'd be brilliant. So they got 3, 4, 5 trout, I can't remember what it was, and it was their best day ever, and they came in, and then he said to me, right, he says, you're hired. He says, what's your rate? And I told him my rate. And he says, right, I'll give you such and such, which was over my rate. And he says, you just arrive here on the shore at the guest house in your boat every morning at 10 o'clock. And if my son wants to go fishing, this fella had plenty of money now. He says, if my son wants to go fishing, we'll go fishing. And if he doesn't, you go fishing by yourself or you go home. You'll still get your daily rate. And I went, gee, that's lovely. So about 4 or 5 days into this fishing trip of his, it was the semi-final of the Champions League. Chelsea were playing Barcelona, and I like the soccer. I wouldn't be a Chelsea fan now, I'd be a Norwich fan, sadly. But
Norwich, they've gone down this year, haven't they? Again.
Thank you. Yeah, they're up and down like a horse.
Yo-yo.
So anyway, he says to me, do you want to go and watch the match this evening? He says, we're Chelsea fans. And I says, geez, I'd love that, I says. And I thought he was talking about going into a pub in Uachtarard to watch it. So I had resigned myself to booking a B&B or a hotel in Uachtarard for the night. And then he gets out the phone and he rings his pilot, Andrew. And he says, Andrew, where's the big bird? And Andrew replies, it's in Athlone.
So you were thinking about his wife then, William?
I hadn't a clue what he was on about. Like, I'm there standing in Wellingtons. Do you know what I mean? And he says, I can hear Andrew saying, grand. And then Patrick says to him, myself and Mr. Follen are going to Stanford Bridge. Fuel it up and make sure there's plenty of drink on board. And then Andrew says, tell Colin tell Mr. Follen there's champagne and there's gin and tonics on board, and if he'd like anything else I can run down to the supermarket or whatever. And I says, no, I says, we'll have the champagne going over and we'll have the gin and tonics on the way back, I says. So it was absolutely remarkable. Like, we landed in the helipad in Stanford Bridge, and Roman Abramovich was there at a kiosk, and Patrick's helicopter is a real high-end Sikorsky, an 8-seater, and he landed it right beside Roman Abramovich's Sikorsky. And then he looked at me and he smirked and he says he's very jealous of me because I have the newer model. He said, so that was funny. The game was boring, it was 0-0, but geez, it was quite amazing. And
so
then,
you only expected her to be in the boat at the end?
Yeah, and then about 2 days later, we came in off the lake and the small helicopter was on the shore outside the guest house. You couldn't land the big one there, you see. It's not feasible. The small helicopter was there, and he says, Colin, he says, we're not going fishing today, but you're the only person never to ask me for a spin in the helicopter. Everyone else asked me. So he says, Andrew will bring you wherever you want to go today, but you've only about an hour and a half flying max, because we won't have enough juice to get back. And I says, fine. He says, where would you like to go? And I says, I'd love to see Loch Corrib from the air and maybe Loch Mask, if that's okay. But I'd love to see the shallows and the islands of the Corrib. And I remember it was an awful windy and rainy day. Absolutely terrible during the mayfly. And so we're flying around the lake, and like I didn't realise when you take off in them small helicopters, the tail comes up first, you see. So you're kind of facing down on the ground, and you're going up into orbit, but you're looking down, you see. And as well as that, there's no wipers on it. Do you know what I mean? So when the rain is coming in on the windscreen, you know, I was kind of looking around for. I was going to say, well, you turn on the feckin' wipers there, for God's sake. You know, you can hardly see out, like, you know. But to make a long story short, anyway, amazing to see the rocks, and they look like grains of sand from the air, to be honest with you, over the Corrib. And I wanted to see Ashford Castle, the estate, because there's so many kind of private little, you know, just little houses and estates within an estate. And I wanted to see that. And I said to Andrew, I says, just fly around Ashford Castle there and the estates and the grounds. I want to see it from the air. So basically what had happened then was 4 or 5 of the staff had came out to the helipad, you know, dressed up in their suits, like, you know, waiting to take your baggage. They thought we were guests coming in to stay in Ashford Castle, like, you know, the most expensive hotel in Ireland. And I'm there in my Wellingtons, and I says to Andrew, do you know what you do now for the hell of it? Land on the helipad. And he goes, what? I says, land on the helipad there. The staff will come over. I'll take a look around, turn my nose up at it in my Wellingtons, get back into the helicopter and instruct you to take off again. And he did. So that was fun.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I did putting it together. And as it's Christmas, I have prizes for my patrons from guests who have supported the podcast from the start and have kindly donated the prizes. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them. Irish Professional Tyre, Jimmy Tarrow, Sam Funning from Neath and Dillis Angling Association, Wyn Jones for his leather work, Peter Cockwill, and Craig Barr from Flash Attack Flies. So if you're not already a patron and want to enter for the chance of winning the prizes and get access to over 100 episodes plus exclusive content, sign up by clicking patreon.com/Casting with Ceri Jones or visit my website castingwithcerijones.com. Well, have a great Christmas, and as always, don't strike too soon.